your side. You will never see me coming. Go down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wrestling Territories Podcast. I'm your host, Troy. Tonight, we're going to be talking about our information superhighway that we had back in the 80s when it came to professional wrestling. It was pretty simple. It was actually these. And we'll be talking about these tonight a little bit and how they helped us out a lot back in the 80s to know about our wrestlers. Okay, so back in the 80s, we didn't have, of course, the internet and all that stuff. We had TV. And depending on where you were, you could see certain wrestling organizations. Other ones you couldn't. So, for those of you who didn't grow up in the 80s, I'm about to give you a little bit of an education of how we did professional wrestling back then. Kind of, I guess. But anyway, but those who did grow up in the 80s, like I did, you know what I'm talking about. So, we had to rely on things like this magazines to help us out. Now, I never did get Wrestling Eye when I was a kid, but that's one of the magazines we would get. So let's kind of look through those a little bit and let's talk about them a little bit. Now, one of the magazines I got quite a bit as a kid was Pro Wrestling Illustrated. We always got these, and they were something we had in our area that we could always pick up. The Wrestler and Pro Wrestling Illustrated were the two things I would buy. Now, I don't own any more comic books from when I was a kid. These I got, I won off of an auction not too long ago, and I have a video up about that. You can see all the different magazines I got. So we did kind of like a reveal or whatever you want to call it. But back in the day, this is how we found out certain things was going on in other organizations. Now, where I live in North Carolina, of course, it was Jim Crockett territory. It was the Mid Atlantic territory, and of course, we got to see those guys. Because we had USA, we could watch WWF, and because we had ESPN, we could kind of see AWA and the world class USWA, and then later on GWF. But anyway, we didn't get to see a lot, and there'd be times we would see wrestlers, and then all of a sudden they disappear. We didn't know where they went. What happened to them. So if you didn't see them on one of those organizations channels like USA or ESPN, didn't know what happened to him. Like one of my favorites was Sam Houston. I like Sam Houston. I thought he was pretty cool. And for a while there, he was in the NWA. Then he's gone. He was kind of find out he was in Central States Wrestling. Then he leaves from there and goes to WWF, where I do see him a little bit more. But his exposure on TV is not as much then as it was back in the Jim Crockett days. Jim Crockett days was big time for Sam Houston. That was when he really got a good push. But anyway, so these magazines that we have here, they would help us out a lot. And they have different things that you could see in here. You'd have sometimes you'd have like fantasy matchups where they would have fantasy matchups that actually did happen later on, like the Road Warriors and Demolition. But then you'd have the well, here's something here. Sid Vicious is the most awesome man I've ever wrestled, and this is from Kerry Von Erich. And so you'd have things like that, the articles about them. Yeah. And so things we probably wouldn't see in other territories, uh, those things would pop up. Yeah, a lot of stuff from WWF and the NWA quite a bit, but you get the other promotions in here as well. Another one would be like Wahoo McDaniels. All of a sudden he's there and then he's gone. Next thing you know, he may have popped up in the AWA. I think it was when he left the NWA, he went there. But then you have these, well, like this, the Focus, or In Focus rather, and it would talk about different wrestlers and things that was going on in those territories. Um, let's see, what else do we have here? Um, let's see. There's that was kind of interesting. These are, I believe, this is where. Let me turn the slide on just a little bit better here. So they're like comparing his wrestlers to these actors or actresses. So you got here Wahoo McDaniel being compared to Buddy Hackett, and recently, um, I can't remember how you pronounce his last name, but he's the football player here, right? The one that's had a lot of controversy lately with Brett Favre taking the lay down and stuff. His name is Mark Gastasso. I can't pronounce that name right, but they're comparing him to Don the Rock Morocco, and then Sting here. Um, who is it he's compared to? Um, Bridget Nielsen. That's who it is, Bridget Nielsen. So that's they are comparing him to. But Don Morocco, yeah, and Mark, they look a lot alike. Wahoo and Buddy Hackett, kinda, not a lot, but yeah. Mark was the all-time sack leader. If y'all been following that controversy that's been going on, he even confronted Brett Favre about taking the lay down for Strahan to break the record, and it's that's pretty big right now. Look at Hulk Hogan with that old WWF belt there. It was very similar to like the TV title and stuff, and um, in the NWA, it was a pretty cool belt. So it's one I would like to own if I could get a replica of that one, just because I like that style and design. But let's take a look at some more stuff. Okay, as we continue on here a little bit, another thing that was really cool to check out in these magazines were the ratings, the wrestlers' ratings, and where they were the top 10. You had the organizations down here that were, like the bigger ones right here, as far as like the NWA, WWF, AWA World Class. Then you'd have like Stampede, CWA, and Continental, and PNW, Pacific Northwest. But that would help you kind of see. Sometimes that could actually help you see where wrestlers were that were no longer around. Um, let's see. Trying to see if there's anybody here like Don Morocco in Stampede in 1989. That's where he was at. Of course, he'd been in the WWF for quite some time. Let's see. The PNW champion, the Pacific Northwest champion, was Top Gun. I'm not familiar who Top Gun was. Let's see. Colonel De Beers, I do know who that is. Steve Dahl, kind of know. Matt Bourne, he ended up being Doink at some point in time. So all these are Pacific Northwest guys. So you can look through here and kind of see, like Continental had Brad Armstrong at the time. And so this is 1989 again. This magazine is, and Massachono and Johnny Rich. Some of these guys, I was seeing the NWA, like Black Bart. Let's see. CWA, of course, Jeff Jarrett, Bill Dundee, Wendell Cooley was a champion. Sid Vicious was there. Excuse me. Robert Fuller. So those guys were there. World class Jerry Lawler was a champion at that time. Kerry Von Erich placed second behind Iceman King Parsons. Iceman might have been uh, what title did they have? It was a secondary, like the American title or something like that was their secondary title. But anyway, so that's probably why that was like that. Then the top guy here is Randy Savage. He's of the top 10. Randy Savage is number one, the WWF champion at that time. You had Ric Flair, Jerry Lawler, Barry Windham, the U.S. champion, Sting, Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan number 6 on this list. Lex Luger 7th, Ultimate Warrior 8. He's the Intercontinental Champion at that time. Kerry Von Erich 9th, and 10th is Bad News Brown. That's your top 10 in 1989 for that week or month of May. Excuse me. And then like the Road Warriors were the top tag team along with Demolition, Beautiful Bobby and Sweet Stan, then Warlord Barbarian, Tanaka and Diamond, Williams and Sullivan. They were U.S. tag team champions at the time. Samoan SWAT team were world class tag champions. Dennis Condrey and Randy Rhodes. They were the NWA at that time. That's just before. In fact, I think being in May, Condrey had already left the NWA at that time. Best I remember. But anyway, Robert Fuller, Jimmy Golden, the CWA tag champions, and the British Bulldogs were number 10. So you go back and you take a look at these. Now you got your most popular, most hated too, by the way. So we'll carry on with most popular and most hated. I think these are pretty cool. These are really neat. Most popular was Hulk Hogan. Most hated was Big Boss Man. Those are your two top most hated. Then you got the most popular. Um, Here's one that's going to interest you. Let's go to the most hated first because this last one will get you because it's 1989, and I'm not sure where the Rock and Roll Express is, but hang on just a second. So Ric Flair is number 2 behind the Boss Man. Then 3 is Barry Windham, Andre the Giant, Hakeem, Steve Williams, Mike Rotunda, Bad News Brown, Iceman Parsons, and Ricky Morton, the Rock and Roll Express. I don't know. Let's see. Wonder where he was at that time. Mm, for him to be top 10. Oh, he's in CWA at that time. I guess Robert Gibson wasn't with him at the time. See, these things were interesting. The most popular was Hogan, Savage, Sting, Warrior, Rick Steiner, Lex Luger, Jake Roberts, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Dusty Rhodes, and then Kerry Von Erich round out your top 10. Um, so there you go. That was interesting because I didn't. I know that Ricky Morton turned heel like in 91 or 92 with the York Foundation. That was a stupid organization, by the way. I thought that was a horrible storyline. But anyway, so if you remember the York Foundation, comment below if you didn't like them either, or comment below if you did like them. But anyway, so on the back of these things, you get like, I had a lot of these guys. These wrestlers you could buy the action figures. Uh, there you go. Get a ring with it. You get your ring. You got wrestlers. You got these guys were pretty cool. To get back in the day, and it had a cage you could get with it too. Yeah, there it is, right there. I don't know how good you can see that, but there's a cage that came with that ring too. Had all that. Had every bit of that. You have like scouting reports. That was pretty cool. That's another thing that could have helped you out. Uh, Talks about different ones like there's Steve and Casey, and then Don Morocco. Let's see, Dutch Mantel, Hakeem, Cactus Jack, Dustin Rhodes. Look at Dustin Rhodes back in '89. Right there, huh? There you go. Dustin Rhodes, Austin, Texas. You're as a pro one. So he was a baby in the business back then. Let's see. Strengths for him was having a legend for a father. That's what it said. Anyway, um, let's see. So through these magazines, it would help you be able to read things like here's the Ultimate Warrior, and so if you're like I said, the good thing about these magazines were if you're not sure about other organizations, it was the only way to really look, to see what was going on. Like in Pacific Northwest, I didn't see anything from there. So here it wasn't until 1987 before I ever saw Mid South, which was UWF at the time, and that was only because Jim Crockett had purchased that, and also Florida and Central States. I remember vaguely Central States, but I remember Florida and the UWF being on some of our local stations, and that kind of helped out a little bit too. Um, we had the USWA for a while, then became the GWF, which the GWF was not too bad. The GWF didn't last very long, but it did turn out some pretty good wrestlers like the Patriot, Marcus Bagwell, the 1-2-3 Kid, or X Pac, or whatever you want to call him these days. Let's see who else was there. They had one of my favorites, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, as well. So so Marcus Bagwell was the handsome stranger then. Trying to think back, but the Patriot is one of my favorites that came out of that organization. And I was really happy to see him there in the WCW. And then also, don't forget Booker T and Stevie Ray came from there too. And those two guys were two of the best tag team ever. Booker T is probably one of the best world champions ever. I was really happy to see him become the champion when he did. But we would see people we didn't normally see. Like I said in '87, the UWF would turn out wrestlers I didn't even know about, like Ron Simmons. Ron Simmons got his start down there in Mid South, or one of his earlier starts. was in Mid South, and man, the problem with Crockett buying the UWF in '87, a lot of those names were gone. I mean, he did get Steve Williams, but he didn't get Ted DiBiase. He didn't get Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Um, so it's kind of a shell of his former self, but it did turn out Sting for him. Sting was the main guy for so many years. But when I first saw Sting, it was kind of like, he's pretty cool looking, and he had some good moves, and he was with Eddie Gilbert at the time. And then the face turned for Sting, and then Sting just exploded after that. It was just really cool. But it was good to be able to see those matches. Like nowadays, YouTube, right here on YouTube, there's things you can find. Also, the internet just helps out a whole lot with like Peacock and those places like that. So I found a tag team in this Wrestling Eye magazine here. Doop, there you go. There you are. The Destruction Crew. Um, with Luscious Johnny Valiant. Little trivia there with those two guys. They were good. They were Mike Ennis and Wayne Bloom. They were in the AWA, and I did get to see those guys some. They ended up being the wrecking crew for Ole Anderson and WCW under masks. They were in blue outfits with blue masks and all that. So that was pretty cool. Then they ended up going to the WWF and being the Beverly Brothers, which I didn't like that gimmick at all. But that tag team was really good. And, it's just things like that you come across just looking at these magazines and just seeing things. And it like triggers your memory for those of us who lived it. And you got, I don't know, here's their top 10 stuff that they had back in the day. That was kind of how they had the pictures, and you had the top 10. Whoever owned this before me, had check marks on these wrestlers for some reason. I don't know why. This is from, let's see, February 1990. And looks like the Olympians were the AWA tag champions. Let's see, Demolition was the number one tag team. Uh, Jim Cornette was the number one manager. With Bobby Heenan, Jimmy Hart, Paul Ellering, Gary Hart, Sherry Martel, Teddy Long, Slick, Mr. Fuji, and Johnny Valiant. Pretty cool.
Right in your side, you will never see me coming. Go down.
All right, moving on. The Wrestler is another magazine that I talked about earlier. It too it was part of the Pro Wrestling Illustrated stuff. But it was another magazine I would pick up when I would go to the stores or whatever, or even the flea markets. Some people would be selling at flea markets. Um, Hulk Hogan, Dino Bravo, the man Hulk Hogan cannot beat. Ric Flair wants to break Steamboat's legs. So there you go. But that was, and you'd have like the pro wrestling. You could order their stuff too. If you wanted a hat, shirt, stickers, whatever, all that stuff you could order. And I never ordered anything. There was one wrestling magazine I did order because I really wanted it. It was a back issue, and I can't remember what it was, but this was like maybe 87, I guess, when it was. This year, excuse me, on this is 89, July of 89. And you had things like Q&As. This was a Q&A for Lord, Michael P.S. Hayes. There's that. So these magazines are old, so I'm trying to be a little bit careful with them. And they've been used up. You can tell somebody was really enjoying reading these things. So yeah, like here you could order magazines if you wanted to. It was $3 each. Let's see, what else can we find in here? The Homecoming. Let's see. What is this about? Dusty Rhodes. And then you got Al Perez. The Homecoming. So this was 89, so I think Dusty was already gone from the NWA by then. Yeah, that's the PWF title that he's holding. That was a Florida-based organization, but that's the PWF title that Dusty's holding there. So he was let go by the NWA WCW just after the whole. I think it's after Starrcade. It's after the whole bloody eye thing with. So what happened was Road Warrior Animal stabbed him in the face with one of the spikes in the eye, and it injured. Put his eye out, so to speak, made his eye be injured, and it was too graphic for TV. And it wasn't long after that they fired Dusty because of that. Compared to what we see now on TV, it's no big deal. But anyway, back then it was a pretty big deal. But so Dusty, there you go. Dusty was PWF champion in '89. Flair talking about breaking Steamboat's leg. Um, Spotlights. Why McDaniel on this one? So again, like I said, these are some cool stuff. You go back and look and see all these things. It just triggers my memories quite a bit. Um, and it was again, like I said, it was how we got our information back in the day. And so I want a stack of comic books, or a stack of them. I'll show you. There you go. A stack of comic books, or not comic books. I'm sorry, wrestling magazines. I got tons of comic books back here, but wrestling magazines, and I just enjoyed looking through those and trigger my memory and stuff. So, for those of you guys who and gals who grew up like I did in the '80s and remember this stuff, it does trigger your memory. For those who didn't grow up in the '80s, this is kind of a good thing you might want to do is go maybe order some of these from or buy some from eBay and get you some wrestling magazines. I think it would help you understand a little bit better what we dealt with back in that time frame. Again, it was our information superhighway back then. That's the only way we knew what was going on with other wrestling organizations and stuff like that. But we had we had them. We were able to read. Some I did buy. Some I just kind of would hang out waiting on my mom or somebody, my mama or whoever was in the grocery store, and we just go to the magazines and read a little bit. Sometimes I'd buy them, sometimes I wouldn't. But again, that's how we got. That's how we got our knowledge back in the day with the pro wrestling. But I hope you enjoy this video. I'm going to be going live soon, right after the holidays, right after Christmas is over with, and after the new year. And maybe we can get some guests on here. We'll have a good time. But until next time, God bless. See you soon.